Hello, I've had some questions about my endometriosis symptoms. Some people said that they've had thoughts that they perhaps have endometriosis, but they're being dismissed by doctors, and they would find it helpful knowing what my symptoms were in my journey towards having surgery and diagnosis. So, the very first symptoms in hindsight were likely fatigue. I've had fatigue since I was a teenager, so I would get home from school and I'd have to have a nap after school. I never seemed to have enough energy to do my homework, so I was always doing it on the bus on the way to school, things like that. This was always labelled as laziness and just not me being motivated enough to get the work done, which in hindsight I don't think was the case. I just never seemed to have the energy or the drive to be able to self-motivate myself in that way, despite being very intelligent and despite being very motivated and being able to accomplish a lot of things. I was I published a book of school poetry in my sixth form class, things like that. Was very good at getting projects done with minimal energy reserves. So that was probably the first sign, and the fatigue only got worse until in about, I think it was 2016, after I came off the pill and switched to the copper coil, which I think made my symptoms worse. I went to the doctor about 6 months, I think it was, after I came off the combined contraceptive pill, which would have been suppressing any endo symptoms for fatigue, and they suggested that I might have chronic fatigue syndrome, but after blood tests they found that I had some vitamin deficiencies, and they just sent me away and said, if you take supplements you'll be fine. But before this occurred, I've also developed IBS symptoms by the age of 18, 19, where I would go through cycles of... Sorry, I was getting a bit of a tickly throat. So I'd go through cycles of constipation and then loose stool and diarrhea. So the constipation would be sometimes I wouldn't go to the toilet for a week, and it was really, really painful, and at least, I think it was 2 or 3 times I ended up going to the walk-in clinic when I was at university to talk to the nurse there, because I was in so much pain because I hadn't gone to the bathroom for a week, and then they would prescribe me laxatives, and they just told me I had IBS. So I just got told at that point that it sounded like irritable bowel syndrome, and to make adaptations to my diet, and that would help. It didn't. I always felt like it got worse when I did the things that I was meant to do to help IBS. So when I increased my fibre intake and stuff, I'd feel worse. Like the bowel movements got worse, they got more painful and things like that. So I was just really at a loss of what to do with that side of things. So those were my 2 main set of symptoms. So it was IBS and fatigue. By the time I opened my studio in 2018, that was when my back pain started, and it was very intermittent. So it only happened, the first time it happened, I was just wrecked for a week. I had to lie on the floor and point at people, telling them what to do. And I thought it was because, increase in activity, teaching, going from teaching, 2 hours a week to 6-8 hours a week, and the stress of opening up a pole studio, I put it all down to that. And then it happened a few more times, and I kept putting it down to training, and I started seeing a physiotherapist. And the physiotherapist, identified things, said maybe it was a weak core, which, now it just doesn't make sense. Why would a pole instructor have a weak core? Weakness in the glutes area, due to having, being pigeon-toed as a child, which again didn't make sense because I did the exercises. I always engage my glutes when I'm doing things on the pole, when I'm demoing moves when we're doing exercises and conditioning. I have really good body awareness, so it didn't make sense for it to be a muscular imbalance in that way, that extreme, and it wasn't responding to the exercises, and in fact some of the exercises made it worse. So some of the exercises that made my pain worse were like lateral leg raises, so like lying on my side and lifting my leg up to the side made it really, really bad, and seemed to set it off. So I stopped doing exercises like that. And the physio I was working with was great. She was really interested in pole. She was really interested in helping me out, but she was confused. So she didn't know, one, why the pain was reoccurring even though I was doing the exercises, and two, why it was changing. So the problem was that it wasn't always the same side. Sometimes I'd have pain on the left side of my back, sometimes on the right, sometimes in the middle, and it kept moving. And she was like, this doesn't make any sense. And that took us to the first lockdown in 2020. It was now a lot more regular, and I had a big flare up during the first lockdown because I went from being very active to doing hardly any activity, which again made me think that it wasn't pole causing the pain. And actually I realised that pole was helping my pain because staying active was keeping my back from becoming really tight and inflamed. And that's when my physio said, I'm really sorry, I can't help you. I think you need to go to the doctor for this because it's not making any sense. And there was other things that would make my back pain worse. I was no longer able to cross my legs for long periods of time because my feet would go numb. I couldn't sit cross-legged on the floor because it made my knee hurt. And there was a lot of different movements which I slowly adapted to over the years because they would set off my symptoms. So at that point, when the physio said, I can't help you, it doesn't make sense, go to the doctor, I started going to the doctor for investigations. Now, it was lockdown, so they weren't seeing people in person. Oh, the other symptom I had was migraines. So when I opened the studio, I started developing migraines that would last for 2 weeks. And they wouldn't be touched by anything, no painkillers, like strong painkillers wouldn't touch them, nothing would do anything. They'd come on around the onset of my period because I used a migraine tracker, so they'd come on just at the end of my period, and they would last for about 2 weeks. Now this was absolutely horrific. Teaching with a migraine is hard enough. Teaching with a migraine for 2 weeks is, I don't even know I don't know how I got through the first 2 years of running my studio because I had no other instructor at that time. I was teaching solo, teaching everything on my own with increasingly bad back pain and with 2 week long migraines. So I don't know how I did it, but just pure, like, I've got to fucking do this energy. I had no choice. So yes, 2020, the first lockdown, they weren't seeing anybody face to face, so all of my investigations were done over the phone and via going in for blood tests and things. They ruled out a lot of stuff via blood test, and they ended up saying, well, there's nothing we can do. It sounds like it could be fibromyalgia. We will refer you to the pain clinic. So the pain clinic spoke to me on the phone for about 40 minutes. They said, it sounds like fibromyalgia, but you haven't had other tests to rule out other things. I'd had like all the tests for like to rule out joint issues and stuff like that. I can't even remember what it's called now, but yeah, I'd had some tests done to rule some stuff out that they could do via blood work and things, and then I'd been referred to the pain clinic, and they were just like, it sounds like fibromyalgia, but we can't give you an official diagnosis of that because you haven't had all the other exclusionary tests, but we'll treat it as such. But they'd heard what I'd done for pain management at this point, and they were like, there's nothing that we can give you that you're not already doing. We don't want to give you pain medication. You're already doing all of the other stuff we can do. The only thing we can offer you is a pain management course. But I already knew everything that was on the pain management course. So they said, we're going to just discharge you, but we'll still keep you on the record. So if you want to come back, you just need to give your GP a call, and they'll re-refer you and we'll get you through quicker. So I was, with the mind that I had a fibromyalgia diagnosis, and was trying to manage it based on that information. However, at this point, I started getting some clotting, bleeding in the mid-cycle, so around the time that I would be ovulating. So I'd have my period for about a week, very light, not too heavy, and then I'd have a big heavy clot bleed in mid-cycle, and obviously this is unusual. So I went to the GP again and started getting investigated for this. I was also at this time having the back pain more consistently, and it was more noticeably around my menstrual cycle. At this point, I was getting smear tests done. I was getting investigated with physical exams, and they noticed that I had a cervical ectropion. Now, an ectropion is where the internal cells of the cervix grow on the outside of the cervix, and they are just, sensitive, and they bleed more easily, so they can create bleeding during sex. They can create increased discharge and a couple of other symptoms. However, they do not cause pain. So they were like, well, this could explain some of the bleeding, but it won't explain your pain, but we'll do a treatment for that. And maybe it'll help resolve the bleeding. So I was waiting for referrals. This is over a 2-year time period, because with each referral you're waiting 3 or 4 months. And they did a heat treatment, basically, where they inject your cervix with local anesthetic, and they use a hot tool to cauterize the surface of the cervix. At this point, I'd also asked to have my copper coil removed, because I was experiencing worsening symptoms, I think, because of the copper coil, and I wanted it out. The gynae I saw had the worst bedside manner. He didn't listen to me at all. He was really dismissive. He kind of talked over me. He didn't ask me any questions. I just would not recommend him at all. He did the cervical cauterization, and then he couldn't find the strings for my coil. Bear in mind, I told him at this point my back pain was so bad it was keeping me awake at night, because my back pain would improve during the day, and then as soon as I got into bed it would get bad, and it would get increasingly worse during the night, so it would wake me up. So I wasn't getting the amount of sleep I needed. I told him this, and I told him that I thought the copper coil was making it worse, and he said, I can't find the strings, shall we leave it in for another 3 months? I was like, absolutely not, absolutely not. Made him book me in for an inpatient procedure to get the copper coil removed a week later. So I went in, and I was also getting the Mirena coil fitted at this point, because he said, if you think it's endo, then the Mirena coil is the first step for treating those symptoms. Great. Get the Mirena coil fitted a week later. So I go in for my procedure, and basically what they do when they can't find the strings is they have to pump water through the cervix into the uterus to open it up and to be able to find the strings and to pull it out. The removal wasn't too bad, so if you have to get this done, don't panic too much. The pain and everything wasn't too bad. However, they don't give any pain relief for the removal or the fitting of the coil, which I think is barbaric, to be perfectly honest, because the pain of having my Mirena fitted again was horrible. I started crying, and I have a very high pain tolerance. I started crying after they fitted the Mirena because of the pain, and the nurse was like, are you crying because of the pain? And I was like, yeah, obviously. So I had the Mirena fitted. They said that should stop my periods, because at this point my periods were going on for 2 weeks, so I was bleeding for 2 weeks, not heavily, but still bleeding for 2 weeks. And they said go away. So this was October 2021 that I had it fitted. I went away, and I had a few months where it wasn't seeming to get better. My period is still 2 weeks long, so that hasn't actually improved. So in January, I did ask for another referral, and I am currently still on the wait list for that referral. So it's been 8 months, and I'm on the wait list for a phone call with the NHS. Yeah, I don't need to say anymore. Need I say anymore? So, but in the meantime, to its credit, the Marina coil has totally transformed my life. My back pain improved because by the time, sorry, I'm like jumping up and down the timeline here. By the time October 2021, November time, I was struggling to walk up the stairs. I was struggling to walk sometimes when I was demoing routines in particular. I had no energy, and I would be shaking. My whole body would be shaking like this after I demoed because I was so exhausted. I lost what felt like strength, but it was really like tiredness in my body. I couldn't do things that I could usually do. So for example, in the warm-up, we have moves where we kick our heels to our butt. I couldn't do that anymore because it was so tiring for my legs. I would just be in total agony, and at this point they'd given me painkillers, the menophytic acid, which you can take like 5 days a month, which I would take on my very worst days, and I was using a heating pad and stuff like that. I was like an old lady, like walking the way I could walk around. I was having sciatica pain. My back was so tight that a physiotherapist told me that my lower vertebrae weren't moving. So my very last vertebrae, your vertebrae are meant to kind of have a little bit of movement in them. He said it was locked solid because the amount of tension and tightness in my lower back. Despite the fact I'd also had an MRI at this point to check that I didn't have a slip disc because my back pain was so bad. And despite the fact doctors going, oh yeah, but you're still really flexible and you got a flexible back, so it can't be that bad. But my lower vertebrae was so tight, it would not move. I've gone through a lot of different avenues to try and find out what was wrong. So yeah, my back pain was really bad. I was also getting numbness in my foot when I was driving. So I was getting pins and needles in the bottom of my foot, and when I was walking long distances, or like for more than like 20 minutes, long distances, walking for like 10-20 minutes at a time, my feet would go numb. Not completely numb, but pins and needles. And I also had numbness in my glutes, in the top of my butt cheeks. So do you know when you've been like sat on a wooden chair for ages and you just get this change of sensation in your butt? I had that when the back pain was flaring up around my period. I'd have that in my glutes. So it was affecting the nerves. Luckily, I've not got any signs of nerve damage or like permanent nerve pain or anything. But the inflammation in my back was probably affecting the nerves into my pelvis and into my hips. I was having really deep pelvic pain, the only kind that could be like, I had that pace around, there was nothing else I could do. I would say it was like level 9, 10 pain. It was the worst experience, just being in this amount of agony that you couldn't do anything except like walk around and like cry, because nothing would relieve it. Sitting down would make it worse, lying down would make it worse, standing up for too long would make it worse. It was just, it was really bad. It was really, really bad. And all this time, I couldn't pole the way that I wanted to. That was the thing that made me happy. And I started using a sunflower lanyard at that time because I had to have access to a disabled toilet, because I'd have really painful urgency. So like when I needed to go to the toilet, it was happening like in the next minute. And if I didn't get somewhere, I was gonna like have an accident. So I started using a sunflower lanyard, making sure I had access to bathrooms at all times. I also started getting pain when urinating in the morning. So I'd go for a wee in the morning after like at 3 a.m, 4 a.m, and I would get cramping in my abdomen. So I just lie in bed with a heat pad on it to try and like ease it off. But it was like the act of pushing down to empty my bladder created like spasms. I also started developing some food intolerances. So certain things, drinks in particular, like those coffees with like powdered milk and sweetener in, would set it off really bad. Certain drinks with sweeteners in. I stopped being able to eat certain things because they'd give me really bad bowel spasms, and this pain was like horrific. This was like a 9 pain, and I would still be teaching with this. I don't know, I really don't know how I did it. I would just push through it and act like it wasn't there. But at times my students were like, your face is great, like you need to sit down. And yeah, so this all started to improve when I got the Mirena coil fitted. Around December time, I started getting blood in my stool a couple of times, not too many times, a couple of times, because I think they fitted the Mirena coil just in time. I started getting blood in my stool, so I went back to the GP. They did some stool sample stuff. They were like, yeah, it's just IBS. And I was like, really? Is it really? But they ruled out anything like Crohn's disease or anything like that. And that all improved with the Mirena coil. So I stopped getting blood in my stool. My back pain improved quite a bit. I was still getting it like for a few days, like for 4 or 5 days of the cycle, not for the whole day of the cycle. And the really bad days weren't like 9/10s, they were like 7/8s. So it was like a big improvement. I was getting my more mobility back and stuff like that. The gut symptoms were still as bad as they were, and they seemed to be getting worse. Like I seemed to be getting more intolerant to things, and my energy levels did improve, but I was still needing to sleep every day and stuff like that. By the way, I got COVID in January 2021, and everything went downhill after that. I think I had long COVID alongside endo, and it just fucking destroyed me. It just destroyed me so bad. But yeah, I think that is everything that takes me to today. I went and got private consult because I've been on a wait list for a phone call for 8 months with the NHS. I was like, I cannot do this. This is ruining my livelihood. It's making me impossible for me to do my job. I don't feel like I'm getting anywhere in life. I can't motivate myself. Like I can't do the house cleaning and things like that because bending over would set off my symptoms. So I couldn't clean the bath or hoover or do the laundry because it was causing me so much pain. And so I went for a private consult. He did an internal exam and he said it feels like there is inflammation around the uterosacral ligament, which is the ligament that connects the cervix to the top of the cervix to the uterus, I think. And it's the posterior cul-de-sac between the uterus and the rectum. He said that it feels like there's inflammation there. And he just checked where my pain was. I said the lower back. And I gave him all my symptoms, and lo and behold, when he did the surgery, I had endometriosis on the lower back, and in that section that he pointed out, the posterior cul-de-sac, which would have explained the blood in my stool, some of the bowel symptoms and things like that. There was also adhesions, which is where organs get stuck together as a result of the inflammation. And he decided to remove my appendix. So hopefully I should get a lot, as the inflammation and everything, and as I heal from the surgery, a lot of these symptoms should improve. I know that some of you wanted to know these, so you can compare your own experiences, and I hope that it's helpful. If you have any questions, just pop them in the comments.